Good afternoon, everyone. So this is a very special Grand Rounds. Not that every Grand Rounds isn't special, but this is a different one. And because this is a joint institute for the clinical and translational research, as well as Department of Medicine Grand Rounds. So who here has heard of ICTR, ICTR? All right, so that's good. I asked the same question at the School of Medicine Executive Committee this morning, and it's gaining traction because there was about 50% of people actually heard of ICTR. Last time I asked, it was about 0.5% of people. So ICTR is an infrastructure that has been established to help faculty, UMB faculty, so UMB faculty from the 7 professional schools, do clinical research. Our motto is from molecules to curbside, and we provide support and infrastructure to allow faculty to do research. And one of the really important tenets is community-based research. And I'm delighted that today we have experts that are going to lead us through a discussion and presentation and maybe some didactics about how to do thoughtful community-based research that is not only based in what we want to do, but in what the community thinks are important. And this 360 academic medical center to the community and then back again is absolutely critical. And we're very, very lucky that our lead speaker today is Dan Mullins. I think he is the local hero, local expert and doyen of community and participatory research at University of Maryland. He's a professor and chair of Pharmaceutical Health Services Research Department in the School of Pharmacy. And as you think about how Dan and his colleagues, and I'll allow Dan to introduce his colleagues, talk about community research, think about ICTR. We provide pilot and feasibility grants up to $50,000. We have a competition once a year. We give micro grants that we call vouchers, going from $5,000 to $10,000 every 2 months. We provide free biostatistical, bioinformatics services, community advice. So it's really there for faculty to use. We funded 50% of the pilot and feasibility grants last December. These vouchers, we're funding well over 99% of applications. It's only people who apply in error don't get funded. And we're up to about 1,000 hours of support in our cause and resources. This is the ICTR website, and put together by Wanda Fink and Megan Banquero, and it's very helpful. It's very user-friendly. Even I can navigate it. So, any questions? Please hit the website. So, Dan, the podium is yours.
Good afternoon. Today's presentation will be co-presented by our patient advisor, Gail Graham, myself, Dr. Tom Oates from the School of Dentistry, and Dr. Fernando Wagner from the School of Social Work. In the spirit of community engagement, we always believe all of our sessions with the voice of a patient. Please welcome Gail Graham to the stage.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. Again, my name is Gail Graham. In 1997, I was diagnosed with HIV. I was working at Kennedy Krieger Institute, a single mom with a 9-year-old, and with a 10-year-old and an 8-year-old. And I was, diagnosed with this disease. As I was going to my internal medicine doctor, he didn't know at the time I was the first patient he ever had that had HIV. So I made it a point as I was going through, I said, if I ever had a chance, I would want to go to the community and educate them so that nobody would have to go through the different things that I went through. I was introduced by my best friend to a pastor, Dr. Franklin Lance, and I was going to their church. And I told him my situation and about the different things I experienced, family members giving you paper plates to eat off of, friends not wanting to do anything with you, support groups that wasn't appropriate for me because I wasn't NA or I wasn't Alcoholic Anonymous, just different things that I went through and how I wanted to teach. But I didn't want it to bring the stigma to that church because the stigma then, and even now, is just outrageous. People don't want to know about HIV/AIDS. So he said, he looked at me, he said, Gail, this is your ministry. So then I thought, maybe this isn't a church I want to go to because this pastor is talking about this is my ministry. And needless to say, a year later, I became the director of Mount Lebanon Baptist Church HIV and AIDS Outreach Services. So we provide free testing there. I'm a certified HIV tester and counselor. And we also have a testing for turkey event every year. So for World AIDS Day, if anybody comes and get tested, they get a free turkey. And we also have, during that time, different speakers or other things there for the community. Our community is in a food desert, so we always have something from the Maryland Food Bank that we always give out to our community. Now, the pastor at this church, he has a habit of inviting you places, and then when you go, you realize that he's getting ready to task you with something. So I was volunteering at his office, and he said, Gail, I need you to come into this meeting. So I said no, because I knew what he was up to. So he refused, he just stood there, and he said, no, come into the meeting. So, after about 15 minutes of going back and forth, no, I'm not. Yes, you are. No, I'm not. I get into the meeting, and it's about maybe 4 or 5 people from the University of Maryland, and they're researchers. Now, I have a problem with some researchers because I was on the Mayor's Commission for HIV and AIDS. I am currently on Johns Hopkins University ACTG Community Advisory Board and HPTN. Now, some of this research is all about the medication, not necessarily about the patient. And while I can give my voice, I still felt that a lot was needed. And so when I found out that we had a researcher, a group of researchers, I'm like, oh, Lord, I'm not getting in the middle of this. So Dr. Mullins, started talking and everything. He was talking about the patient-centered research. And when he finished, he looked at me, he said, so do you think you'll be interested? And I said, no. So he, rephrased everything. And, after about another 5 minutes, he looked at me, so, now do you think you'll be interested? And I looked at him and said, no. So then he said, well, maybe if one of my representatives met with you for lunch, give you more information. And at that time, I was just like, I just want to get out this meeting. So I said, okay, we can do that. So when the young lady came, she gave me the same spiel, and I'm still saying, no, I'm not interested. Because we had researchers come into our community, and they just took the information and didn't give anything back to the community. And I felt like they were taking advantage of the community just to get the information that they needed. So when I said no, this time, the young lady said, well, can we have a table at your HIV/AIDS event? So I said, yeah, you can have a table. And I'm thinking I'm going to put them in the back somewhere I can see them, because I don't want them to really interfere in what we were doing. Because for HIV-positive people, we are lacking of affection and love. So to have people come in and not want to touch you, or ask you some questions that's uncomfortable, and they don't, and you can feel that they're not really genuine, they're just trying to get that information. I didn't want that for my community. But surprisingly, this group came in, they came early, and they said, what do you need? And they just pitched them, I told them nothing, just sit there. But they got up and they were like helping people come in and everything. And then somebody said, well, can we go get them coffee and donuts? And I said, sure. And so as I'm walking around and trying to get everything together, I look and they are sitting there with the community and they're like this. They're touching them. They're looking them in the eye. And I was like, okay, you got me. So from then on, I started working with my pit bull, and that's Dr. Daniel Mullins. And seeing the things that he was doing in the community, the genuineness, he would just show up to events and pitch in. We had our community event block party, and he was there breaking down boxes, a doctor in the community, breaking down boxes. Just little things like that. And it makes the community want to talk to you. They see you involved and they're surprised that you're a doctor, but they still, they realize how human you are. And then I think the most thing I'm proud of is the new learning healthcare community, because they're going to the community asking them what they need, helping them to express their feelings to their doctor so that it's not just going for emergency care, but, sustaining regular health care. And also helping the doctors to know how to talk to the patient, so that they can give them the information. So that's one thing that I'm really, really proud of. So that's how I became a patient advisor for the Patients Program. Thank you.
What does this look like then in the context of research? And as Gail pointed out, it does mean going out into the community, but we are still a research institution and a research infrastructure. So today we want to talk about how if you want to do research with the community, you need to address the mistrust that exists. We also want to talk about what are those principles that come from the literature about best practices for actually doing work with the community and having what you do be based in the community and from their community perspective. And then how do you apply that to doing community-engaged research? And then finally, I'll present a case study of a trial that we're supporting now, and Dr. Oates will end with some work talking about how we can work with networks of providers out in the community. So I'm going to turn it over now to Fernando, Dr. Fernando Wagner, who's going to talk with us a little bit about community-based participatory research.
Good morning, good afternoon already. It's a little difficult to come and do a speed dating in just 2 or 3 minutes to give an introduction about community-based participatory research and community-engaged research. But it is, so I'm just going to highlight some of the most important things that I believe can help you understand and put in context the idea of working with communities, for communities, through research. And so the idea of community-engaged research is not only to have communities be part of, participants in the studies, but also to have them be part of the process in all aspects of the process that involve from the beginning, the research question, and then moving on to the design of the study, working on the analysis of data, and then working on the results, and then the dissemination. And all this is put in a place that will allow both communities and scientists benefit from the research process in a way that will answer the research questions that we need to answer, but at the same time answer to the needs of the community and also the concerns of the community. So this is an important part to consider. And one of the aspects of community-engaged research that is so relevant is that it seeks to create, to build trust from the very start of the process, and that way use the resources that are available both from the community and from the research partners, so that new alliances can be formed and collaborations can be created, and that way the output is going to be much better. So when we work with communities and for communities in the process of research, we also are ensuring that our communication is going to be responsive to what is needed with the community. So at the end of the day, what we try to avoid is this idea of the helicopter research, that researchers come in their helicopter, get in a land that they don't know, they don't have a clue, collect some data as quick as possible, very objectively, and then leave and change nothing, and then leave nothing. And sometimes some incentives, and that's it. And part of the problem with the surrounding communities to universities in general is that we have created not only mistrust because of the atrocities that others have done, but also because the way we have approached participants in communities. We use communities, but we don't invite them to be part of the process. So it is very important to address these issues. So the idea is not a particular method for community engagement, and community-based participatory research is more an approach, is more like an overall view of how we pretend to do things, how we try to do things. And it really considers that the researchers and communities will be partners and will engage in equitable processes where power is going to be shared and where the process is going to be shared and the output and the results of the research are going to be shared. So this creates new challenges for us. So, for example, who owns the data once you have been through a process of research like this? But there are challenging times, and the only way we can really address the needs of our communities is if they are part of this process. I was trained as a psychiatric epidemiologist, and I love working with big data sets. And often the product of this would be a nice paper in one of these top journals, and then many people might cite the study, and that's great. Don't get me wrong. I mean, we love that. But the problem is that unless this gets to and with the community, the chances that the results are going to be meaningful and are going to help transform reality are very dim. So we need to work with communities from the very start to the end. I apologize. This is a busy slide, and the font is small. It's a test, and see whoever can read this is not normal. But so there are 9 principles of community-based participatory research, and these are really well matched by I can say a very seminal study and proposal published in JAMA a long time ago by Mullins, where he worked out and identified like the 10 steps that we need to do so we involve communities in the process. And this comes from the very beginning, identifying the topic for research, and then going through all the processes into getting the community to participate and patients to participate in determining the needs, the approach, the questions, and then moving on to the different stages of the study. It doesn't end with publishing a report. It goes back to the community. It backs to the members of the members. So the one message I would like to leave is that community-engaged research is not about getting patients, getting participants to accept the IRB forms. it's really a matter of finding new partners that will help us give new light to the research we do. So it really is more transformative. And just to close, we could, and we do our work as researchers and scientists, we are accustomed to working in our own area and disciplines, and now cross-disciplines. But we seem to be comfortable when we work between us, right? But that will not take us very long. So as this proverb says, that if you want to go far, you need to go with someone. You want to go together. So I will stop here and then.
Yeah, so we've been going far with several of our community partners, including Mount Lebanon Baptist Church. I also recognize that many of you may be trialists or may aspire to be trialists, and I wanted to show you what this looks like in the context of a trial. So I've had the good fortune of working with a lot of what I call like die-in-the-wool NIH placebo-controlled trialists who thought that they had done everything else, why not try this stuff? And so here's an example of a trial that's about to enter its 4th year. It's a pragmatic clinical trial. Some of you may be familiar with photons and protons. Some of you may know that we've got our new proton center right across MLK. And despite the fact that these are popping up across the country, we really don't know if protons are any better than photons or vice versa. The FDA has said they're both good. They both help women with breast cancer and men and women with other cancers. And so the principal investigator out of University of Pennsylvania came to us and asked us if we could help with this trial, which is an ongoing trial that's funded by the Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Institute, or PCORI. So the study is RADCOMP. It is funded by PCORI, as I said, and as a result, I have to put up the obligatory slide that says what I'm about to say is from Daniel Mullins, not speaking on behalf of the PCORI Institute, its governing board, or its methodology committee. So some of the things that we learn that sound simple but make such a difference in conducting a clinical trial. This is a pragmatic clinical trial that compares proton and photon. How many of you might be willing to admit that you still don't know the difference between those two? Okay. Most women who are diagnosed with breast cancer haven't heard of either, so of course they don't know the difference. And when you talk to survivors who maybe have used one of these, they sound a lot alike. And so one of the things they taught us, and you'll notice up here, is first, bold that R in the H, and secondly, don't just bold it, but capitalize the R, so that we remember what is the difference between these two. It sounds really simple, but big words are confusing, and even little words with 2 syllables like proton and photon can be confusing to patients. And so we learn from them simple little things like making it clear what the difference is and then helping people to understand. And because our director of research, Michelle's sitting here, and she doesn't let me leave the room without telling my non-clinician view of this, I always say, I've learned how to explain this because I hear how women explain it when we ask them how they'd explain it. By show of hands, how many of you know what Windex is even if you've never used it? Okay. How many of you have ever turned the nozzle from spray to stream? See where we're going? So if you don't know the difference between photon and proton is like the spray, and proton is like the stream. And there's a hypothesis that because there's a stream as opposed to a spray, that maybe, especially if you have left breast cancer, that there may be less spillover to the heart, right? And I've learned to communicate it that way by listening to what women say, because that I can remember, right? Right? And so it sounds very simple, but it is amazing how our NIH researchers have converted when they realize, oh my goodness, this is like not taking away scientific integrity, it's just allowing an individual to truly understand what the study is all about and to decide whether they want to participate in it. In this particular case, we expect no difference in cancer outcomes, but we want to see if there will be a difference in, scientifically, cardiovascular toxicity. But if I go back to my first slide, our women taught us that this trial needs, what? A tagline. Isn't this great? Yeah. Everybody's raising their hand before. How many of you have ever given a tagline to any trial you've ever been associated with? 1, 2, 3, right? They have a tagline. The tagline is a study at the heart of breast cancer treatments. Because that was the way of getting people to understand this was about heart disease along with cancer. And those things may seem simple, but they take some time. But as we move forward, it helps us to hear from our advisors. So these are not clinical trial participants. These are survivors who are advisors to the process, who, as you can see, meet with us on an annual basis for a year, go into calls, and then respond to all the materials that we have related to this set of activities. And so one thing that we learned from them was that the consent form wasn't very friendly. To his credit, some of you will cringe when I say this, the principal investigator at Penn, having gotten IRB clearance, went back and modified his IRB because our women said they still didn't like the consent form. That was a pretty strong commitment on his part. So we got through that. And then they upped it on and said, we don't like a consent form, period. We think you need a video. So some of you have spent some time at the IRB. You know that anything you do in the context of a clinical trial needs to go through an IRB, right? So what we learned was that maybe we need to stop doing
women who have had
consent forms and start doing videos along with them so people know what a study's about. And our
women who have had radiation therapy for breast cancer helped us put together the RADCOMP clinical research study. They told us they were most concerned about things like heart problems after therapy and how radiation might affect the quality or the length of their life. The RADCOMP study compares 2 types of FDA-approved radiation therapy for your breast cancer: photon and proton therapy. Radiation may reach parts of the heart during therapy. It may increase your chances of having heart problems in the future. Proton therapy may reduce the amount of heart exposed to radiation, so it has the potential to reduce heart problems. Proton therapy may also cause more skin reaction than photon therapy. So far, there have not been enough breast cancer patients treated with proton therapy. In this study, doctors hope to learn which type of radiation is better at helping you live longer or have a better quality of life. If you decide to take part in this study, you will be randomly assigned, like a coin flip, to receive either photon or proton therapy once a day, 5 days a week, for 5 to 7 weeks. If you choose to participate in this study, neither you nor your doctor will choose which treatment you get. Instead, you will have an equal chance of getting either treatment. Both you and your doctor will be told which treatment you will get. You may have side effects with either type of radiation therapy. No matter which group you are in, your doctors will work very carefully to reduce the radiation to your healthy tissues, and you will receive any other care chosen by you and/or your doctors. Both groups will be followed for at least 10 years after completing radiation therapy. To learn more about the RADCOMP clinical research study, talk with your doctor, and connect with us at www.radcomp.org.
So that's what we're talking about. When you listen to the voices of patients, that you can really transform the way that you do research. And we're immensely pleased with what we've been able to do, listening to the voices of women who are survivors, who can tell us how to do research differently and I think better. In addition to that consent form and consent video, they help us to put together blogs, they help us to put together a website, they help us to get brochures about this study. And each of those, of course, go back through the IRB. So on the one hand, this study is about are protons or photons better for women with non-metastatic breast cancer. But I think this study is also about how do we really advance informed consent. I think it's how do we really learn to listen to people who have lived through a disease and what it is that they would want to know in the context of a clinical trial. We have testimonial video, so here's Kim Wright, and she gives her testimony about what she went through at the time and the decision that she had to make. I'm going to play just a brief part of this as well, but when you see this video, you'll understand that if you were recently diagnosed, understanding that somebody else is going through a devastating situation as well sometimes helps you on that journey a little bit more.
It was New Year's Eve. It was back in 1994, and I found a lump in the shower. I hadn't had my full exam yet. That's a lesson to everybody. So she got me in for a full exam, wanted to send me for a mammogram because she didn't like what she was palpating either. It was huge, actually. It was about, this big, what I was feeling. It was hard, and it was large, and so she got me in for a mammogram, but just in case, she decided to get my blood drawn for a pregnancy test at the same time, and the pregnancy test comes up positive. This is fantastic. We're going to have our second child. She's like, well, we can't send you for a mammogram then. Let's send you for an ultrasound. And you know what? We'll just get a core biopsy at the same time. It's cancer. It's breast cancer. I'm like, okay, so what do we do? What's going to happen next? Well, you have two choices. I'm going to send you to a surgeon this evening. You can probably have a lumpectomy, or you can have a mastectomy. We're going back and forth. And I said, well, what happens with the baby? And she just looked at me. And that's when I started crying. Now, I had a 2-year-old daughter.
So you can imagine the rest of this video. But when you go through an experience like that, you want to make sure that women in the future have a better transition experience to their survivorship than you might have at the time. And so women like Kim Wright are willing to share their story, not only to make this a better trial, but also to make the process of care better for patients like her. And so they help us to design informed consent forms, videos, brochures. They're willing to tell their story. They're willing to share their thoughts in blogs. And they're also willing to tell their experience being an advisor to research. And so some of you may know BMJ. Many of you probably hope to publish in BMJ someday if you haven't already. One of our patients published in BMJ about her story, not as a patient in a clinical trial, but as a patient advisor telling us how we could make the RADCOM study more meaningful. We work with our advocacy partners, Young Survival Coalition, Cancer Support Community, Share, Living Beyond Breast Cancer, and NCCS, and we encourage them to blog about things that are important to them, but also, when appropriate, to blog about what this trial means to them, and to share information about this trial with their members so that we can get the word out. Our advocacy partners are true advisors, and these are separate patients than those who enroll in the clinical study. We've learned that it's probably not a good idea to mix the two. When you're going through your survivorship journey, it's enough to go through that survivorship journey. And only later is it appropriate for you then to be able to give back again and help research to be better. So we work with our advocates, many of whom are survivors, and they give us advice so that those women who are human subjects in the trial will hopefully have a more meaningful trial experience. They did help us to figure out which of 3 quality of life instruments we should use. Many of you know that these days health-related quality of life instruments are used in a lot of clinical trials, but in many disease states, including breast cancer, there's multiple ones. And instead of using like the one that we used in our last study, which maybe that was a bad decision, we thought it was best to share the 3 quality of life instruments and have our patient survivors help us to decide which one was best for this trial. We then also had a blog about what are quality of life instruments, so that we could educate people on why do we have these types of instruments and why do we measure quality of life, not just tumor. We do continue to work in advancing the spirit of the CTSA. We're very proud to be part of the ICTR, and that we do hope that we can continue not only in kind of late stage translational research like this, where these two therapies are already approved by the FDA. But to work with anybody on the T1 to T4 translation, because anything that we're doing in research should improve human health, and who better than people with lived experiences to give us advice on how we can research and discover better. If you're interested then in thinking about what that might look like in the community, we can think about working not only with patients in the community, but their providers. And so to talk a little bit more about translation, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Tom Oates.
Thank you, Dan. I'm happy to be here, certainly. I'm a relatively recent transplant to Baltimore from the University of Texas, San Antonio, the Health Science Center down there. And one of the things that they did in San Antonio very effectively with their CTSA, I'm going to go back a slide if I can here, is the CTSA is a Clinical and Translational Science Awards program, and this would be an NIH funding support mechanism for something like the ICTR that Dr. Davis mentioned at the beginning, that deals with building infrastructural and support mechanisms within the institution to support clinical and translational research. And these are the goals off their website, and not to focus on anything specifically at this point other than that translational sciences and translational research are primary to what we want to do. And so in terms of understanding and appreciating what translational science means and what is translation, it is turning observations into interventions. And the goal, again, is to improve the health of individuals and the public. I think in terms of what we want to think about in terms of translational science, we want to think about the spectrum or the continuum that is represented within translational sciences, and it goes all the way from basic research through preclinical research, as you would think, to clinical research, which was long my background in San Antonio. But that San Antonio group, as they were building a CTSA award application, were looking for a community engagement along the lines of what you've heard from our colleagues this afternoon. But in addition, they wanted to focus on another level of community engagement, and that is at the practitioner level. And they had a long history of a medical PBRN, practice-based research network called StarNet. And through StarNet, they had established for a number of years an interesting mechanism to look at research, not at the clinical research level, but more at the clinical implementation level, and hopefully impacting even at the public health level. And so that's what CTSAs look for in terms of community engagement. It is reaching all the way to the individuals and to the public at large, but there's an important step that we can represent here, and I think it's relatively rare that in Maryland that there are many practice-based research initiatives ongoing that I've been able to find thus far in being here. But one of the things that becomes important is, as you think from the patient at the center of all this, as shown in the diagram, to what's at the periphery of this image, and that is developing new approaches, demonstrating usefulness, and disseminating findings. Those yellow arrows represent the position that practitioners can bridge from the patient to the information and to the asking the right questions and identifying where we want to be. So the practitioner becomes an important process. We heard Gail, and we also saw in the video from Kim earlier that they both talked about maybe some initial interactions or opportunities to get involved in the community engagement. They reached out to practitioners. They reached out to people that they went to first. So practitioners play an important role in this process, and they can facilitate all of this in their own way. And so that's what our practice-based research is really all about. It's partnered research. We're trying to build those bridges, if you will, between the different components. And importantly, these relationships are clearly bidirectional. We're looking to build and support and connect between all of these groups to find gaps, to find needs. What are the things that are important to our practitioners? What is important to you in your practice? You may have a different sense of that than the researchers in the building. You may have a different sense than the patients. And is one right or wrong? No, they're all appropriate, and they all need to be considered. And the practitioner brings a unique perspective that they can offer to research and the research questions, and how effective research can be. We think about effectiveness research in a broad sense. They all become important, and they can impact practice and the patients that are being cared for. So I think practice-based research certainly gives us a real opportunity to extend. And I think when I think of our PBRN goals, this is what I think of. It's strengthening the relationship between research and the oral health needs of the community, and it builds research studies that target those needs. And I put this picture up there because when I'm talking to practitioners, the one thing we want to think about as a clinical researcher is not what are the outcomes, the metrics of our study. It becomes what happens when the patient walks out of the office, when they leave the building. Have we really made their lives any better? And that's where practice-based research has a unique opportunity to make sure we do that. So why is a PBRN important? Again, translation of new information. Typically, you'll see this 17-year time period cited as an average length of time required for translation of research into practice, going from initial studies and discoveries into clinical care takes a long period of time. Can we speed that process up? If we have more direct practitioner involvement, more direct input on asking the right questions, we can help facilitate that process. The effectiveness of clinical care can be important too in terms of different populations, the ease of use or recommendations relative to different treatment approaches, and compliance and patient usage are just some examples of how active patient care in practice can be somewhat different from the prescribed and well-controlled clinical research environment. So what may be effective in clinical research may have whole different levels of effectiveness in the practice community. And it's an important, and I think our practitioners appreciate this, it's an opportunity to guide evidence-based practice, to contribute to asking the right questions important to their care. So these are all good reasons, I think, for PBRN. And just another example, I was involved also in a national dental PBRN that's been supported by NIH. And this was just a summary of probably the first 8 or 10 studies that our national network was employing. And when you look at the numbers of practitioners involved in these studies, surveys up to 3,000 responders to our survey, averaging 1,900 per survey. Our clinical studies practitioners range from 30 to 200 participating, with an average of 125. In terms of patient involvement, for patient-involved studies, we range from 300 to 4,000 patients per study, averaging over 2,000. These are pretty robust numbers, and if I tell you that this is the kind of turnaround we can get in typically 6 to 9 months in a study, I think you're going to feel that that's something we can really get some useful information in a hurry. We can turn these things around. So there's a lot of power in the numbers. It's not a big effort by anybody. The trick is to develop a small incremental approach where each practitioner contributes a little bit, but collectively getting enough involved, we can make a difference. So what we started now is we've initiated the Maryland Practice-Based Research Network in Dentistry, impressed, and hopefully you're impressed with this idea. It's been started in just April. We initiated the recruitment process. We already have 187 practitioners that have come on board and asked to join the network. We've completed 3 surveys. We have another one that's going to be going out shortly as well. And we've got 2 NIH grant applications that we've supported in development through these surveys. We also have another industry-supported proposal in development. So over the first 6 months, we've gotten a lot of interest. We've been able to provide some useful information to some of our research colleagues to support research, to make sure we're asking the right questions. And I think it's really a great opportunity for us. It's an opportunity that can extend. Again, I come from the background in medicine, leading to me to build a dental network when I was in San Antonio, and this is an opportunity maybe to foster and build or support similar type networks in medicine. So it's something I think that I would like everybody to consider and look for opportunities to build off of. So that's all I have in terms of my specific comments. I think any comments in general, Dan, before we go to questions?
Up to questions for any of us. Also, if you have any questions about the Institute for Clinical Translational Research for Dr. Davis.
So, thank you. So just to recap, so Dan Mullins is Chair in School of Pharmacy. Tom is Professor and Chair of Advanced Oral Sciences and Therapeutics in the Dental School, and Fernando Wagner is Professor in the Social Work. So this really is collaborative, interprofessional approach to research that I think is so important. Clinical research is the quintessential research team sport, and that's what we're doing here. So, questions, comments?
Gail, say come up
Yeah.
if you want, and Tom and Fernando, if there are questions.
Hi, thank you. That was really interesting. Can you give us some tips on, we're trying to engage patients in designing our study, but having a very hard time getting them involved, and you had to court Gail for a while. You courted her until you were able to convince her to help you out. Do you have any suggestions on how to get patients interested in helping us as advisors?
I would go in the community, find someone that's active in the community, and get to know what that community is about, and then go to them and ask them if you can participate in different events that they may have. And then once you do that and build that relationship with them, then they will be more apt to help or to be a part of what you may be interested in. So either through the churches in the community, it could be the community organizations. For instance, right by Mount Darman, we got the Greater Mount Darman Council. So they know more about they work and have events within the community. And so once you become a part of that, then they will open up to you and be more interested in what you're trying to do.
So our model is to continue to work with the same partners in the community, so Pastor Lance, who's the pastor of the church. When we're doing a new study, we often go to him and ask, do you have somebody in your congregation with this condition who you think would be good, right? And so we're not having to build that relationship up over time. And I think that's the structure that we're trying to create within the ICTR, is to have organizations. And so it could be a church, it could be an existing practice-based research network because they already have access to patients. It could be other organizations. So Morgan State, so Dr. Wagner was at Morgan State, was recruited here, but he still has good ties back there. And sometimes some of the HBCUs may have stronger holds in certain parts of our city than we do. And so it's really thinking about the other anchor institutions and working with their leaders, I find to be the best way. In addition, we do what others do. We go out to health fairs and all, but when you go out to health fair and you meet a person for the first time, if you give them a gift card, they might fill out your survey, but they're not going to say, here, take my blood. That just doesn't happen. I think that's a mistake that researchers have made in the past.
So I'm going to ask Kathy Palmer actually to comment. So Alan Schuldiner spent hours upon countless hours going out to the Amish community to get credibility and trust, and he had high trustworthiness. And I think that's absolutely critical in the success that we've had in the Amish community. Kathy, would you like to talk about that?
Sure. Alan's relationship with the Amish community in Lancaster was built over, as you said. Alan Schuldiner's relationship was built over many, many years with the Amish community, but it all started with him, the physician, going and knocking on doors in the household and asking what the community, what the Amish people were interested in. He specifically was looking at diabetes at the time, but through that relationship that he built over time and getting his team filled with not only nurses that were sensitive to the Amish research values, the Amish community's values, but also engaging liaisons that were Amish people. So all of his studies involve, and he employs 12 Amish liaisons. So every visit to an Amish person's house is a nurse and a liaison, an Amish person that's there to help individuals feel comfortable, know that they're trusted in the community. So, he definitely employed the community itself to get that level of trust.
because you've had incredible results. So what percentage of the Amish community are involved in research studies now?
So I can't say what percentage, but I know they have enrolled around 6,800 Amish people in Lancaster.
And the total population is?
I don't know the answer to that, but they're still, they're going church district to church district still with the wellness study, which is a study that's trying to enroll all adult Amish individuals. And so they're still enrolling. About 800 people a year or so get enrolled. I have a quick follow-up question to Amber about engaging, trying to get community people. So could we request consultation, Daniel, with your group to find out how our particular research interests might be guided to navigate through engaging communities? Is that something that Hector can?
And do Megan or, you want to pass it to Megan or Wanda, they can talk about how you request.
Yes, if you're interested in consultation with the community engagement core of the ICTR, we do have an application process. It's online on our website, www.emaryland.edu/ICTR. And if you have any questions at all, you can call us and we'll help you navigate that. My number is 87952. 87952. I'll be happy to help you navigate that and forward that consult request to Dr. Mullins' group. And usually the turnaround is fairly quick. They're great about contacting you within just a few days to schedule a consult and be in their hands.
And in fact, our colleague who's taking photos, and you saw that incredible video, so we can set up videos for you if that's helpful in recruitment and dissemination and participation.
Yes, and we just know that one of the studies, the PRIC study, chronic renal insufficiency cohort study, funded by the NIDEK, has University of Maryland has been part of that consortium for over 15 years and just completed a video for the community, releasing some of the findings from that research to share with the community. And that was all through the ICTR Community Engagement Core.
I just have one other comment. I just wanted to say that your group is really providing good insight because most of us are under so much pressure, to get your research started. And you don't think to start with the community because, you gain your funding. When you finally get your notice, it's time to go, 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 go. And you really do miss that critical step. What does the community want? What does a certain disease population, what do they want?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
And if you don't ask that question,
So,
you don't know.
yeah, I will say that one thing we're aware of is that people want those types of metrics. And so we're working, Dr. Beckelman about 2 months ago published with co-authors from the National Cancer Institute. So he's the PI on the PCORI study, co-authored with people from the National Cancer Institute, a table showing his enrollment numbers versus every other proton versus photon that was funded by NCI, and you can guess which had the highest enrollment, right? And so we're trying to get out the word that it does take sometimes a little bit more time up front to set your protocol, but then you might not have to keep worrying about why can't we, enroll anybody? Why is it that after 2 months everybody keeps dropping out? We believe that the enrollment will be higher, and with blogs and videos and things like that go through the IRB, that people will feel more engaged in your study and more likely to complete in the end. So for those of you who are kind of only in this for enrollment and retention, come on this journey with us, and we think we can help you with the metrics that are important to you.
All right, and so we've come to your question. So we've been talking about West Baltimore, we're talking about the Amish community, but we can go much further. So we can go West Baltimore to West Africa, for example. We have a huge international global health program, and the concepts of how you do really top quality community and participatory engagement research applies worldwide. And so we would welcome inquiries not just parochially in our neighborhoods, but much further beyond. Did that address your question? Yeah. Yeah. All right, well, let me thank the presenters, especially Gail. I thought you did a marvelous job. And there's some lunch upstairs in the usual place. You have to follow the crowd in the Woodward Conference.
Thanks again for the invitation. Appreciate it. She's great, isn't she?